Welcome back, beloved ones. Today we are about to embark on a journey that delves deep into one of the most intriguing and mysterious stories hidden within the pages of the Bible, the forgotten sons of Moses. You know Moses, the mighty leader chosen by God to part the Red Sea, to face Pharaoh, and to lead the Israelites to freedom. He's a towering figure in biblical history, but have you ever wondered what happened to his sons, Gershom and Eleazar? Why did their names fade into the shadows of history, while the descendants of his brother Aaron take center stage? Here's the mystery that will shock you. Why was Moses' son erased from history? What if I told you that there is more to the story of these two sons than meets the eye? What if they weren't merely forgotten by time, but deliberately hidden in God's divine plan? And what if the reason they were kept out of the spotlight is one of the most profound lessons we can learn about God's purpose and His timing? In this video, we're going to uncover the secrets behind the disappearance of Moses' sons from the biblical narrative. What was the purpose of their seemingly hidden existence? Could they have been part of a greater divine scheme that we've all missed? The truth is far more mysterious and powerful than you can imagine, and the answers may just change the way you view your own life and purpose. If you've ever felt overlooked, as if your role is behind the scenes or unnoticed by the world, then this is the story for you. Because sometimes the most important roles in God's plan are not the ones that are in the spotlight. Could Moses' sons have played a hidden, yet critical role in God's grand design? Their silence speaks volumes about the power of humble service and trusting God's timing. Stick with us, and we'll reveal the shocking reasons why these two sons who should have been front and center were mysteriously erased from history, and how their story is more relevant to your life than you might think. So if you're ready to uncover the hidden truths of the Bible that most overlook, don't forget to drop a 777 in the comments below, like this video, and share it with anyone who's ready to dig deeper into the hidden mysteries of God's Word. Let's dive into this mystical and eye-opening journey together. What lies ahead is far more than a forgotten story. It's a divine revelation that will change your perspective forever. Why was Moses' son erased from history? The shocking truth you won't believe. The story of Moses' sons, Gershom and Eleazar, is one that seems to have slipped through the cracks of biblical history, leaving behind only fragments and quiet whispers. This narrative unfolds in a pivotal moment in Moses' life, a time of solitude and transformation. After his dramatic flight from Egypt, where he had fled due to his involvement in the death of an Egyptian taskmaster, Moses found himself in the land of Midian. It was there, in the rugged wilderness, that Moses would experience the kind of exile that would ultimately mold him into the great leader he would become. Moses, a man on the run, encountered a figure that would change his life: Jethro, the priest of Midian. And it was through Jethro's family that Moses found not only refuge, but also a new life. He married Zipporah, the daughter of Jethro, and settled into a quiet, humble life as a shepherd. It was in this peaceful yet obscure existence that Moses fathered two sons, Gershom and Eleazar. Their names themselves carry weight. Gershom, meaning a stranger there, a reflection of Moses' status as an outsider in Midian, and Eleazar, meaning my God is my help, a powerful testament to the divine aid Moses had received when he fled Egypt. But here is the twist. Why does the Bible remain so silent about the lives of these sons? Why were they seemingly erased from the story of Moses' great mission to lead the Israelites out of slavery? Think about it. Moses, the man who would deliver the Israelites from Egypt, has sons, but we hear so little about them. Was it intentional, or was there something deeper, something hidden that we haven't yet uncovered? Let's pause for a moment. If you were to delve into the life of Moses, you would quickly discover that his sons were not just ordinary children. Gershom and Eleazar played a crucial role in the narrative, yet the details of their lives are shrouded in mystery. Why is it that Moses' legacy, so intricately woven with God's divine plan, seems to overlook his sons? Could it be that their stories hold secrets we are meant to uncover? Or were they simply too insignificant to the larger narrative? What do you think? Could there be a deeper reason for the Bible's silence on Moses' sons? Could this silence be a form of divine strategy? Or perhaps there are lessons hidden in their absence, lessons that might unlock new insights into Moses' journey and our own spiritual paths. The first mention of Moses' son Gershom in the Bible comes in Exodus 2:22, where it states, Zipporah gave birth to a son, and Moses named him Gershom, saying, I have become a foreigner in a foreign land. This name Gershom is not just a mere label. It is a window into Moses' inner world during a time of great upheaval. The name itself comes from the Hebrew root ger, meaning sojourner or foreigner, and within this simple name lies a profound story of exile, loss, and the deep sense of displacement Moses was experiencing. Consider this: Moses, who was once raised in the luxurious halls of the Egyptian palace as the adopted son of Pharaoh's daughter, found himself in an entirely new world. The life of royalty, power, and privilege was now a distant memory, replaced by the harsh realities of life as a fugitive. Gone were the days of sumptuous feasts and royal decrees. Now Moses was tending to sheep in the barren wilderness of Midian, a far cry from the life he had once known. What's striking is how Gershom's name encapsulates this emotional and spiritual journey. Imagine the weight of such a name for Moses. This wasn't just a name for a son. It was a name that reflected his very existence. Gershom was a constant reminder to Moses of how far he had fallen, how much he had lost, and how deeply disconnected he felt from both his Egyptian past and his new life in Midian. He wasn't just a sojourner in a foreign land. He was a man in search of identity, wandering between two worlds, trying to reconcile who he had been and who he was becoming. Do you ever feel like a foreigner in your own life? As though you're caught between your past and your future, struggling to find where you truly belong? Moses' experience in Midian, his years of exile, wandering, and personal reflection could be something we all can relate to at different stages in our lives. Just like Moses, we may find ourselves in seasons of transition, feeling like strangers in a foreign land. And perhaps, just as Moses named his son as a way to process his own journey, there are moments when the names we carry reflect our own spiritual and emotional battles. Have you ever wondered how Moses navigated that inner tension, that struggle between past and future? What would it be like to look at your own life and see a name that holds such deep meaning? Would it inspire you to step into your calling, even if you feel like a foreigner in your own skin? The birth of Moses' second son, Eleazar, is recounted in Exodus 18:3-4, which says, "One son was named Gershom, for Moses said, 'I have become a foreigner in a foreign land.' And the other was named Eleazar, for he said, 'My father's God was my helper. He saved me from the sword of Pharaoh.'" Eleazar's name, meaning God is my help, stands as a profound declaration of divine intervention during one of Moses' darkest hours. It is a name that speaks directly to the heart of Moses' journey, his escape from Egypt, and the ongoing protection that God provided as he navigated his uncertain path. Consider the weight of this name for a moment. Eleazar's name wasn't just a tribute to his birth. It was a living, breathing testament to God's mercy and deliverance. When Moses named his son Eleazar, he was not simply recounting a past event, but rather affirming a truth that would continue to shape his faith throughout his life. "My father's God was my helper. He saved me from the sword of Pharaoh." These words aren't just a historical recounting. They resonate with a deeper spiritual significance. Moses wasn't alone in his exile. God was with him, guiding him, protecting him from the threats that loomed over his life. For Moses, who had once been on the run, an outcast in a foreign land, the name Eleazar symbolized more than just a son. It was a reminder of God's continuous faithfulness. Even in the wilderness, even in the midst of danger, God's protection was evident. When Pharaoh's forces were closing in, it was God's hand that intervened. When Moses thought he was alone in his journey, God proved that he was the faithful helper, the constant companion in his struggles. But why does this matter for us today? Perhaps there are times in our lives when we too feel abandoned or overwhelmed by the challenges ahead. In those moments, how often do we pause to acknowledge the unseen hand of God, the same God who walked with Moses through every trial? Eleazar's name isn't just an ancient reminder. It's a modern invitation to reflect on how God has been our helper. How has he stepped in to rescue you when you faced your own personal pharaohs, your own seemingly insurmountable obstacles? Is there a moment in your life where you can look back and say, "My father's God was my helper"? The name Eleazar encourages us to not just remember God's protection in the past, but to trust in his faithful hand moving forward. It is a name that speaks of divine partnership, a reminder that though the journey may be long and fraught with difficulty, we are never truly alone. Gershom and Eleazar's roles in Moses' journey stand in stark contrast to the roles of other prominent biblical figures, such as the sons of Aaron, who inherited priestly duties and played pivotal roles in the unfolding story of Israel. Unlike Aaron's sons, Gershom and Eleazar did not step into significant leadership positions, nor did they become key players in the dramatic events of the Exodus and beyond. Their names, though significant in Moses' life, did not carry the weight of legacy that would shape the future of Israel in the same way. When God called Moses from the burning bush in Exodus 3, Gershom and Eleazar were still young, and it is unlikely that they fully grasped the magnitude of the events that were about to unfold. Moses at this point was hesitant, burdened with feelings of inadequacy for the monumental task God had set before him. Despite his doubts, Moses did not embark on this mission alone. He was accompanied by his wife Zipporah and his sons Gershom and Eleazar as they set out on the journey back to Egypt. Exodus 4:20 captures this moment. So Moses took his wife and sons, put them on a donkey and started back to Egypt, and he took the staff of God in his hand. This simple verse, though brief, carries deep significance. It marks the beginning of Moses' return to Egypt, the beginning of God's grand plan to deliver the Israelites from slavery. But despite the importance of this moment, Gershom and Eleazar are hardly mentioned again in the narrative that follows. While Moses' leadership in Israel would be chronicled in great detail, his sons' involvement is largely absent from the epic story that would unfold. So what does this tell us about the story of Moses and his family? Why were Gershom and Eleazar seemingly sidelined during one of the most pivotal moments in biblical history? Could it be that their absence in the larger narrative serves to highlight the deeply personal side of Moses' journey, the delicate balance he had to maintain between his divine calling and his responsibilities as a father? Moses' decision to bring his family along on his mission to Egypt underscores the humanity behind his leadership. The calling of Moses was not just a divine mandate, it was a call that required sacrifice, both for Moses and for his loved ones. As a father, he was not only responsible for leading a nation, but also for the well-being of his sons, his wife, and his family. In this way, Gershom and Eleazar's roles, though not as prominent, remind us of the personal sacrifices Moses made in obedience to God. Do you ever wonder? Moses managed to balance the weight of his divine calling with his earthly responsibilities as a father and husband. Perhaps there is something in the way Moses navigated his dual role that we can learn from today. How often do we find ourselves caught between our own sense of purpose and the responsibilities we have at home? Like Moses, perhaps the challenge is not choosing between these roles, but learning to embrace both as part of our divine journey. A pivotal moment involving Moses' family takes place in Exodus 4:24-26, a dramatic and somewhat mysterious episode that highlights the deep significance of God's covenant and the critical role Moses' family played in his divine mission. The passage reads, "At a lodging place on the way, the Lord met Moses and was about to kill him. But Zipporah took a flint knife, cut off her son's foreskin, and touched Moses' feet with it. 'Surely you are a bridegroom of blood to me,' she said. So the Lord let him alone." At first glance, this moment might seem confusing, even unsettling. Why would God seek to kill Moses, his chosen leader, just as he was on the brink of returning to Egypt to free the Israelites? Moses, however, had neglected this critical act of obedience, and as a result, God's wrath was about to fall upon him. But in this moment of impending danger, Zipporah, Moses' wife, acted swiftly and decisively. She took a flint knife, circumcised their son, and touched Moses' feet with the blood. In that instant, the Lord spared Moses, and Zipporah's words, "Surely you are a bridegroom of blood to me," underscore the gravity of the situation. Her actions re-established their family's alignment with God's covenant, and Moses' life was spared. This moment is profound for several reasons. First, it serves as a reminder that even those chosen by God like Moses are not exempt from the responsibility of upholding God's laws. Despite Moses' extraordinary calling, his failure to observe the covenantal sign of circumcision nearly cost him his life. But it was through Zipporah's action that the covenant was restored, and Moses was able to continue on his divine mission. Zipporah's swift and seemingly sacrificial act also underscores a broader biblical principle: the role of family in supporting God's work. While Moses is often seen as the central figure in the Exodus story, Zipporah's intervention here was vital. Her obedience to God's command was not just an act of personal devotion. It was an act that directly supported Moses' calling and, by extension, the salvation of the Israelites. In a sense, Zipporah was fulfilling a role that wasn't often recognized or celebrated, but was nonetheless crucial to the unfolding of God's plan. Yet despite this dramatic moment of divine intervention, Gershom and Eleazar seem to fade into the background as the story of the Exodus progresses. When Moses returns to Egypt to confront Pharaoh, his sons are not mentioned. When the Israelites cross the Red Sea and receive the Ten Commandments at Mount Sinai, there is no record of Gershom or Eleazar's involvement. It raises the question, where did they go? The silence surrounding Gershom and Eleazar is striking. Their presence in the early part of Moses' journey was significant, but as the story of the Exodus unfolds, they seem to vanish from the narrative. Were they simply too young to play an active role? Or does their absence suggest a deeper theological message, perhaps about the individual nature of God as calling, and the way that even the most faithful servants, like Moses, must sometimes walk alone in their divine mission? What do you think? Could there be more to their absence than meets the eye? Perhaps their story, though untold in the broader narrative, still holds valuable lessons for us today. How often do we see our own efforts go unnoticed, even when we re-supporting something much larger than ourselves? Gershom and Eleazar may not have been the heroes of the Exodus, but their place in the story speaks to the hidden, uncelebrated roles that are often critical in God's kingdom. Some scholars have proposed that after the dramatic incident at the inn, Zipporah and Moses' sons, Gershom and Eleazar, may have returned to Midian. This theory suggests that the dangerous nature of Moses' mission, which was about to escalate into confrontations with Pharaoh, led to a decision to keep his family away from the immediate dangers that lay ahead. The narrative in Exodus 18 seems to support this idea, as it describes a later reunion between Moses and his family after the Exodus had taken place. Exodus 18:5-6 provides this account. Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, together with Moses' sons and wife, came to him in the wilderness, where he was camped near the mountain of God. Jethro had sent word to him, "I, your father-in-law Jethro, am coming to you with your wife and her 2 sons." This reunion occurring in the wilderness near Mount Sinai confirms that Gershom and Eleazar were not with Moses during much of the Exodus journey. Despite being present at the beginning, their absence throughout much of the dramatic events leading to the liberation of Israel raises intriguing questions. Why were Moses' sons absent during these critical moments of the Exodus? One possible explanation is that Moses and Zipporah made the decision to protect them from the dangers of the journey. The road to freedom for the Israelites was fraught with peril, plagues, and the hostile desert landscape. Keeping the children away from such dangers might have been a necessary step, ensuring that Moses could focus on his mission without worrying about their safety. After all, his mission was about to become much more than a personal quest. It was about the salvation of an entire nation. However, another possibility is that God had different plans for Gershom and Eli that didn't involve their immediate involvement in the public leadership of the Exodus. While Moses was chosen to lead the Israelites, his sons may have been destined for roles that were less visible but no less important. This idea raises a thought-provoking question. Are there roles in God's divine plan that remain hidden, not requiring public recognition or leadership? Could it be that Gershom and Eleazar's absence speaks to a deeper principle that some individuals, though chosen, are not called to be in the public spotlight, but are still vital to the unfolding of God's work? This notion mirrors a broader biblical theme. Not every divine calling is about leadership or public recognition. Some are called to stand in the shadows, supporting the work from behind the scenes, playing crucial roles that, though unseen, are essential for the fulfillment of God's purposes. Perhaps Gershom and Eleazar's absence is a reminder that God's plan for each of us can be vastly different, with some called to a path of and others to a path of quiet faithfulness. What do you think? Could this be a sign that some roles are hidden for a reason, even if we don't fully understand it? If you were in Moses' shoes, how would you balance your mission with the protection of your loved ones? Would you have sent them away to keep them safe during such uncertain times? The story of Moses' family, with all its silences and absences, invites us to reflect on how God uses all parts of our lives, both public and private, for his greater purpose. Interestingly, the descendants of Moses do reappear in the Bible, but their return is brief and somewhat troubling. In Judges 18:30 we read, "And the children of Dan set up the graven image, and Jonathan the son of Gershom, the son of Moses, he and his sons were priests to the tribe of Dan until the day of the captivity of the land." Some versions of the Bible, however, use Manasseh instead of Moses, likely to soften the connection between Jonathan and Moses. Whereas Jonathan, the son of Gershom, becomes a priest for the tribe of Dan. However, his role is not one that honors God. Instead, he serves in a shrine that features carved images, which directly violates God's commandments, as seen in Exodus 22:4-5, where God forbids the making of graven images. Jonathan's actions stand in stark contrast to the faithfulness of his forefathers, particularly his grandfather Moses, who was called by God to lead the Israelites out of Egypt and to establish a covenant with God. This troubling detail raises several significant questions. Did the descendants of Moses stray spiritually? Was the lack of prominence in their role within Israel's history an indication of a larger spiritual drift? Jonathan's actions in the shrine are particularly concerning because they reveal a departure from the legacy of faith that Moses and his family were supposed to uphold. Here we see that even though Moses' descendants were born into a mighty legacy of faith, this inheritance did not automatically guarantee righteousness. The next generation had to choose to walk in God's ways. The story of Jonathan serves as a powerful reminder that personal faith must be chosen and lived out, not assumed by virtue of heritage or family background. This leads us to a profound lesson. Being born into a legacy of faith doesn't ensure one will live in righteousness. It's a personal choice that every individual must make. Just because someone is part of a family with a rich spiritual heritage doesn't mean they will automatically walk the same path. Even the greatest leaders' descendants must decide for themselves whether they will uphold the values and beliefs passed down to them. How does this reflect on your own spiritual journey? Are you walking in the legacy of faith that has been passed down to you? Or are you at a crossroads deciding whether or not to embrace it fully? The story of Jonathan, with its uncomfortable truth, reminds us that spiritual legacy is a living thing, something that needs to be nurtured, chosen, and continually reaffirmed through our actions. Just as Jonathan made a choice to serve idols instead of the living God, each of us faces the choice to either follow the path of faithfulness or stray from it. What path will you choose? The tribe of Levi, to which Moses and Aaron belonged, was set apart by God for special duties, particularly for service in the tabernacle. However, while Moses and Aaron were both from the tribe of Levi, it was Aaron's descendants who were chosen to become the priesthood. This divine decision is clearly outlined in Numbers 3, where God specifically designates the sons of Aaron to serve as priests and assigns the rest of the Levites the role of assisting with the tabernacle's duties. But why were Aaron's sons chosen instead of Moses's? The Bible doesn't give a direct explanation for this decision, but one possibility is that this was part of God's divine plan to preserve the humility of Moses' legacy. After all, Moses was the greatest prophet, the one who spoke to God face to face, as described in Deuteronomy 34:10. However, despite his unparalleled spiritual authority, Moses' sons did not inherit that same authority. This distinction serves as a reminder that God's calling is not inherited like royalty. It is divinely assigned according to his purpose. Moses' leadership and prophetic calling were unique to him, and the focus of God's plan was never to establish a dynasty of spiritual rulers, as seen in the case of other biblical figures like King David. Instead, God's decision to designate Aaron's descendants as priests, while Moses' sons remained in the background, highlights the notion that God's calling is sovereign and not based on family lineage or personal merit. Each person has a unique purpose, and the fulfillment of that purpose is determined by God alone. This leads us to a profound spiritual truth. You do need a spotlight to fulfill God's purpose for your life. Gershom and Eleazar may not have been at the forefront of Israel's history. They didn't lead armies, perform miracles, or stand in the public eye, but their lives still mattered. Their story, though largely untold, serves as a reminder that obedience, faith, and legacy often unfold quietly behind the scenes. Think for a moment about the people in your life who have made a lasting impact on you, but never sought the praise or recognition that comes with being in the spotlight. Maybe it was a parent who spent years praying for you, a teacher who believed in you when you didn't believe in yourself, or a friend who was there for you during your darkest hours. Like Gershom and Eleazar, they were not forgotten by God. Their influence, though unseen by many, was significant in God's eyes. It is easy to feel as though our efforts are unnoticed when we are in the public eye. But the truth is, God values faithfulness and obedience in every corner of life, whether seen or unseen. Just as Gershom and Eleazar were part of Moses' journey but never took center stage, so too are there many whose quiet obedience contributes greatly to God's work. Your life, whether filled with accolades or lived quietly in the background, has a purpose that is divinely appointed. And just like the unseen heroes in our lives, your role matters deeply in God's grand design. So what happened to Moses' sons? They didn't lead the nation, nor did they write scripture. Their names aren't etched into the pages of history in the way other figures are. Yet their lives were a part of God's greater plan woven with purpose and divine intention. Though their roles were quiet, almost hidden, they still had a place in the tapestry of God's story. This silent part of their story challenges our modern obsession with visibility, with accolades, and with being noticed. In God's kingdom, as Jesus tells us in Matthew 20:16, the last will be first. Those who remain unseen by the world are often seen the most by heaven. It's in the quiet, faithful moments of obedience, those uncelebrated acts, that God's kingdom is advanced. This is a radical shift from how the world measures success. The quiet servant star, ones working behind the scenes, often carry the weight of eternity, even when their actions go unnoticed by human eyes. If you've ever felt as though your role is small or that your efforts have gone unappreciated, remember the lives of Gershom and Eli. They may not have parted seas or led armies, but their story, though faint, speaks volumes about the value of obedience, the power of quiet faithfulness, and the unseen ways in which God moves. Their presence, though subtle, is forever marked in the grand design of God's plan, reminding us that greatness in God's kingdom is not defined by fame but by faithfulness. Your role, too, matters. You may not stand at the forefront, but every act of obedience, every quiet prayer, every moment of faithfulness sown in hidden places echoes through eternity. Remember, in the economy of heaven, what the world overlooks, God treasures deeply. You are seen, you are valued. Your life has purpose, whether in the spotlight or in the shadows. Thank you for watching. If this story has touched your heart or given you a fresh perspective, comment "I'm seen by God" below. Hit the like button, subscribe, and share this with someone who needs encouragement today. If you feel led, you can also support this channel through super thanks. Thank you, truly. Whether you give or not, your support, your engagement, and your presence mean the world. You are deeply appreciated. God bless you, and we'll see you in the next video.